Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Jake Ziegler, and I'm here with Brad Garoon. On Never Did It, we look back at the last 100 years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. Today we're covering the year 1957, and we've got an American film and a Japanese film to discuss. Brad, what do you want to talk about first?
Well, I don't know which American film we're talking about, actually, because we called an audible. Are we doing 310 to Yuma as the official film?
Yes, because that's one I'd actually seen. I don't know how I missed that the first time around when we were picking these movies, because I'd seen 310 to Yuma. I saw it at the time the remake came out in 2007. So I had definitely seen it at the time we set up this podcast list, and I had not seen the other film that I had selected, which was Jailhouse Rock. I looked back, it's like, I don't remember ever seeing this. I don't have a rating for it on Letterboxd. Why did I pick this movie? It was puzzling me. So I went back and looked. It's like, yeah, I've got 310 to Yuma on here. So I think 310 to Yuma should be the official one, since that fits the conceit of the show.
Okay, cool. Actually, well then let's do a real quick, because I watched Jailhouse Rock.
So did you?
Okay, so let's just really quickly. There's not that much to talk about, but we've talked about Elvis on this podcast before because we reviewed King Creole, a Michael Curtiz movie starring Elvis Presley and Walter Matthau. And that was interesting because it feels like it has a lot in common with Blue Velvet, and it's actually a good movie, and Elvis is quite good in it, and the music is good, and the story's interesting, and Matthau makes a good villain, and the two female leads that Elvis has to choose between are both very good actresses. It made for a good story. You have none of that in Jailhouse Rock. So it's very okay.
Mm-hmm.
My issue was, what were they hoping people would think about Elvis's character?
Yeah, he's not a great dude in this one. Yeah,
he's really bad. He's like a really bad guy. And you imagine it's Elvis at the height of his stardom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why did he want to do this?
Yeah, maybe he wanted something that was out of pocket, or a little bit different for him, or to get out of that image a little bit. But that's a great question. Yeah, because he just kind of screws over everybody any chance he can get.
I didn't get it at all.
Mm-hmm.
I also thought, as you have to do when you're a big movie fan, I had the inflation calculator.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of money talk in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the movie, the female lead stands to make $250,000 if Elvis sells their record label.
Yeah.
But she'd prefer to be with this guy who has never been nice to her.
Ever. Yeah.
And also they've never been together. Like they actually never were a couple.
How much is the $250,000 worth in today's dollars?
$2.5 million in today's.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, the movie's fine. I mean, it all hinges on the Jailhouse Rock musical sequence, which is very cool.
Yeah.
I thought the rest of the music was very boring.
It doesn't stand out as much as Jailhouse Rock does, but I mean, it's as that sort of musical. Like I said, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fine. I wasn't paying super close attention to it like I do like the official Never Did It films, but like I said, I enjoyed it. But yeah, it's certainly not King Creole in any aspect. Yeah.
I mean, not even close. So that is to say, I've never seen Blue Hawaii, but if you have to choose between an Elvis movie, I would highly recommend King Creole, which is very compelling.
Yeah. And you can watch the Jailhouse Rock sequence on like YouTube or whatever. I mean, if you haven't seen it already, I mean, it's a very fun sequence, and yeah, it's awesome. But you can see it elsewhere.
Right. It also doesn't make sense within the context of the movie. So there's that issue.
No.
So let's talk about, let's go back and forth. We'll start with my movie. So I recommended for you Throne of Blood. This was directed by Akira Kurosawa. It works for this podcast because it came out the exact same day in January of 1957 in the United States and Japan. And it is Kurosawa's adaptation of Macbeth. First off, this is my favorite or second favorite Kurosawa film. It's this or Ikiru, which is another movie I recommended for you on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to make it earlier in his career, but then Orson Welles made an adaptation of Macbeth, and out of respect, Kurosawa waited 10 years almost to make his version. I think this, for my money, this is much better. It's really accessible. What I like about Throne of Blood, it's spoken in plain language. So, it's still a feudalist samurai movie, but it's not Shakespearean language. So it's very easy to understand what's happening. I watched this shortly. Actually, the reason I watched this the first time was because the Coens, just Joel Coen, was about to come out with the tragedy of Macbeth. And I was like, well, that looks actually like real Shakespeare. So I'm going to learn what this is. I mean, I'd seen Macbeth on stage when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I never read it. I was not an AP Lit guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to know the story, and this was such a great way to do it. And I love Toshiro Mifune, and like the whole Kurosawa is very similar to Wells in that he used the same cast in every movie.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so cool, but mostly because the special effects for 1957 are out of this world.
Yeah.
So what did you think of Throne of Blood?
Yeah, I liked this a lot, and I'm kind of like you with my Macbeth experience, except probably even a little less because I had never seen Throne of Blood. I don't recall reading it. I'm sure I'd seen at least some version of it before Coen movie came out, which, like you said, is like real Shakespeare. Like, I mean, the language and everything, and it's a little bit harder to get into. Although with the Shakespeare language, I know it's interesting. Even if you don't exactly understand all the words, you can still kind of like you grasp what's going on. I mean, it's theater. It's it's meant to make sense to everyone in the in the audience. But and I really liked that Joel Coen version too. I thought that was really good. But yeah, this was I also thought was really cool. Like I said, it was very real easy to follow the language and the story, everything. And Mifune was great, and I mean obviously it looks phenomenal. I mean it's Kurosawa, and this helps me like we're talking about blind spots. I haven't seen as many Kurosawa films as I would like. So yeah, this is a really good one.
So in the opening scene, they don't use Shakespearean names. It's Japanese names, but the analogs to Macbeth and Banquo are riding through the forest and they're lost.
Yeah.
And they come upon the spirit, which is the three witches in typical Shakespeare play. Here it's one spirit, and it's a female actress with a heavily distorted voice. It's actually pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
And it actually made me realize, I think this is the only supernatural element in any Kurosawa film. And now I haven't seen them all. I think I've only seen 8, but I can't think of any other supernatural stuff he's done in any movie. That's shot really beautifully, but also just like the running through the woods. Then the galloping through the fog, the way he uses wind, and also there are hundreds of extras and hundreds of horses. The sound design is so scary because this is kind of a horror movie.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's called Throne of Blood. I mean, that's definitely meant to, like you said, an evocative, title. So yeah, definitely.
And the Mifune is unreal. I mean, this is I was watching some of the Criterion commentary. The guy called this a sort of changing of the guard. Although, I mean, like Mifune had already been the star of a lot of Kurosawa's films, but Takashi Shimura, who is the star of Ikiru, and who we've talked about because he's starred in Godzilla movies, and he's a very big star and Kurosawa's guy for a long time. He has a very small but important role in this one, where he's just like frequently at odds with Mifune's character, but off screen. But he leads the army at the end of the movie against the Macbeth character. It was interesting to hear him call this a changing of the guard film. Like I said, there's the effects around the spirit. There's the creepy Lady Macbeth character who's just like,
that scene where she's doing the hands, everything was just like so, and I kept thinking, okay, it's gonna stop now, and it's gonna stop now, but then it just like kept going, and it was that was one of my other favorite scenes that I noticed. In addition to the spirit in the forest, is just I think that kind of stands out amongst the rest of the movie. But yeah, when Lady Macbeth is doing the hand washing thing, like she nailed it.
Yeah, it's funny you say it kept going. I felt quite a few of the scenes did that. Like when they're lost in the fog, that happens. And then there's, of course, this very famous climactic scene where Macbeth gets his. So let me ask you a question. How do you think they... So spoilers. I mean, that's not spoilers. It's Macbeth. Macbeth dies at the end.
Hundreds of years old.
Yeah. In the difference in the telling of this story is there's no Macduff character. So Macbeth dies at the hands of his own army, and they fire hundreds of arrows at him.
A lot of arrows. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. So let me ask you, how do you think they did that?
Did they just do it? Were they just firing arrows at him?
They did it for real! They really fired hundreds of arrows at him. He's probably wearing like wooden blocks underneath his armor because he's getting hit. So I guess the story is that Kurosawa told was that he wanted to do an archery contest among the extras to see who was the best shot. Mifune was like, no. Mifune went to this like archery school to learn how to fire on horseback without riding the horse with his hands for this movie. And he was like, go back to that school and find some real archers to do this. Because you can see the arrows, they come close to his face, but never like crazy close to his face, but they're like all over his body.
Oh, yeah.
And they did it for real. And I guess there was an interview after the fact, and they're like, Mifune, the terror on your face was so well done. He goes, well, yeah, I was terrified.
You meant, going home to the wife. How was work today, honey? Terrifying.
Worst day of my life.
Yep.
And that final shot of the arrow going through his neck is really convincing. I mean, if you stare at it for too long, you can see what's going on, but
don't stare at it for too long. Just enjoy it,
Right.
Yeah.
So I love Throne of Blood. Highest of recommendations. This is one thing I love about Shakespearean adaptations with a twist, is that they provide an avenue for you to see a version of the show where you can understand the language easily, and then go back and watch like Olivier's version or Wells' version or a Branagh version. Like The Lion King gives you a kid's version, or Yeah, or The Northman, or Kurosawa did this again with Ran, with King Lear.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these.
And Things I Hate About You.
Yeah, I actually I've never seen Taming of the Shrew, so I don't know if that's
Neither have I. But I've seen 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah, or O, if you want to see what that one.
There's there's so many of these. We could do a whole podcast about the Shakespearean adaptations that are not it's exactly Shakespearean.
It's pretty cool. So I like it. It's one of my top movies. We'll get to it in a little bit, but it's one of my top movies of the year. And I'm glad you liked it too.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And any more Kurosawa that I can add to my scene list is I'm happy to do it.
Well, one day maybe we'll do some episodes about movies neither of us have done, and we can do like Redbeard, which I've been holding back on watching because I want to see it on the big screen, and I keep waiting for a repertory theater in New York to show it, and they just won't. We'll see. But you gave me, ultimately, the original 3:10 to Yuma. Talk to me about it.
Well, again, it was the only movie from 1957 I'd seen that you hadn't, but also I think this movie's awesome. I had seen it, I think, right when when the remake came out in 2007. I'm pretty sure I watched the remake first, because that's generally how I did. Like when we did with Nightmare Alley, my intention was to watch, like, once you hear a new version's coming out, it's like, well, I don't want to watch the old version yet, because, I want to be, like, involved in the new one. So I'm pretty sure I watched it after the remake had come out, but it's really good. It's a really tight Western from Delmer Daves, who had directed a lot of those type of movies, and it's got really two great performances in it. The story really is about these two men, one of whom is an outlaw, one of whom is a more honorable man, and how their paths cross and how they interact with each other is really cool. Basically, what it is you've got Glenn Ford is playing an outlaw. He is arrested, and they need to get him to trial, and nobody wants to do that because he is the head of a gang, a very dangerous gang that is feared throughout the land. But the one man volunteers to do it. The Van Heflin plays he's got a ranch, he's got a family, he needs the money. There's been a big drought, so he needs the money, and he volunteers to basically shepherd this outlaw to a town called Contention, where they can get him on the 3:10 to Yuma, where he can go to trial. So that's kind of the setup for the movie, and you've really got these two lead characters playing off each other for the whole movie, and it's really, really neat. Yeah, what'd you think about it?
Well, you called it a Western, and what I loved about it was, I mean, it is. It takes place. Right. It takes place in the West. It's about, Heflin is playing a cattle rancher, and he's on hard times. And the one thing you left out is he takes this job, even though he doesn't really want to be involved, because Butterfield, the guy who runs the stagecoach that was robbed in the first place and whose driver was killed leading to this arrest, is offering $200 per person to whoever will get this guy to jail. Ben Wade of the Wade Gang.
Ben Wade. Yep. Great name.
Great name.
Yeah.
At first I thought he said Ben Wyatt. I'm like, is this who the guy from Parks and Recreation is named after? As the movie goes on, Heflin's character, who we'll stop calling him Heflin's character, Dan.
Yeah, Dan Evans.
Dan, as the movie goes on, becomes more convicted in his desire to get Wade to jail. But a good portion of the movie takes place in Contention, in this hotel room, where Dan has to just keep an eye on Wade and keep Wade quiet so that no one from his gang knows that he's there, because they have orchestrated this plan to make it unclear where they've taken him, which is very smart.
And it's really cool the way they pull that off, too.
Yeah. The problem is it spreads not just Wade's gang thin, looking for him in a bunch of different towns, but it spreads the posse, the Justice Posse, thin. So everyone is like skeleton crew, and it's just a lot of danger when everything's relying on so few people. And the movie becomes this psychological thriller where it's just Wade and Dan sitting in this hotel room talking about what is the best option for Dan. Is it to get the $200 from Butterfield, which he's not going to collect if he's dead, or is it to let him go and maybe get this dirty money from Wade, and this sum keeps getting higher and higher and higher. Right? It starts at $400, and ultimately I think it ends up at $10,000. Yeah,
it's like this obscene amount of money for, it would have been in the 1880s when it took place. Yeah, it's just this absurd amount of money. But the thing though is, like, Dan, one of the other motivations he has is, other than the money, is that he feels like his wife and his children don't respect him basically as a man. Since he's come back from the war, he hasn't been able to provide for them as well, which I think is a little unfair. I mean, the guy's doing the best he can, but it is what it is. His wife and his sons weren't didn't look at him with the same respect that they had before. And that's another one of his big motivators, is to do this and to do the right thing. They explore that a lot more in the remake, which we can talk about in a little bit, but that's definitely another one of his motivators here.
For sure. I actually and I haven't seen the remake since it came out. I've always been a big James Mangold fan, and I saw 3:10 to Yuma in the theater in 2010. 2007. Wow, it's been almost 20 years.
So it's time to watch. Like I said, even if you didn't make it for the podcast, you should watch it again like soon, because then you can kind of see it compared to the old one. It's really cool.
I actually fired it up in bed last night and then felt too uncomfortable from a big dinner, so I turned it off. I like the amount that they explored it in this one, because it's very clear that part of this plan to obscure where Wade is they stop at Dan's house and Wade eats dinner with him and his family while he's handcuffed.
Great scene.
So his kids, they know that Wade's a bad guy, but they can't help but be fascinated by him. And at one point, Wade is telling Dan's wife a story, and there's no like real flirtation going on, but his wife is looking at him very wide-eyed. She doesn't get to see a lot of people. They don't live in town. This is the first person who's been by in a while. His wife is very faithful, but they don't shy away from making it seem like, well, maybe she has some feelings for Wade.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I love that this character exists in the movie, even though she doesn't get a lot to do.
Mm-hmm.
But Felicia Farr is a barmaid in the town of Bisbee,
mm-hmm.
which is where Wade ends up being captured, because, as they all do, he puts the pussy on a pedestal.
Sure did, yep.
He spent some time bedding down this barmaid. Now, Felicia Farr is famous in my life for being the wife, not quite yet. In a couple years after this, she married Jack Lemmon, and then was in several Walter Matthau movies because of that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Many that Lemmon wasn't in, actually. But they've acted together quite a bit. So I've seen a bunch of Felicia Farr movies. She's very good.
Mm-hmm.
She's great in this. It shows how quickly Wade can seduce someone. And that happens before Wade has dinner at the house. And you're like, oh my God, is he going to seduce Dan's wife? No, it's not in the cards. But it does give Wade all this ammunition to be like, I've seen how your wife looks at you. He doesn't even bring up until he's starting to get desperate.
Yep.
Anything like contentious about himself and the wife.
Mm-hmm.
But he does rag. He's like, you're not making your wife happy, but with $7,000, you could make your wife very happy.
He even says that one time I could make her happy.
Right.
I would do, I would treat her better. I would buy her pretty dresses, all that. So I mean, Wade is he's an interesting outlaw, because he's very smart. He's more of a cerebral assassin, if to use the parlance of the WWE there. But yeah, he's really smart, and he really knows how to get to people. And that's, I think, how obviously how he's commanded his gang for so long, and how he's been such a successful at what he does. So yeah, it's a really cool character. Glenn Ford just is really, really outstanding in this. He hits every note of it perfectly.
The other character I want to call out is Richard Jekyll plays a character called Charlie Prince, who is Glenn Ford's lieutenant, and he's like very attractive, very charismatic. And I know he's played by Ben Foster in the remake, and I imagine Foster plays it quite differently, because Foster is like a real rough actor.
Yeah.
But that makes me really excited to watch the remake, because I thought that Jekyll was so good as the lieutenant, who ultimately is just like, he's everywhere he needs to be at the right time. He's so funny. He's like, you can't take your eyes off him at any moment.
Yeah.
So that was really good.
I mean, I could say the same things about him. Like, he is so magnetic in this movie, in the remake of it. So it's cool. He does play it a little bit differently, but it's such a great part.
And then the only other, I guess now we're getting into spoiler territory. There's this amazing action scene at the end of the movie where Dan is alone. Everyone has abandoned him. Even Butterfield has chickened out.
Wade told him he would. He's like, Butterfield's going to walk out on you.
Wade's a total Cyrus the Virus. He knows exactly what's going to happen. And so Butterfield has quit. I don't think that the town drunk character is in the remake.
Different. It's a little bit different, but not exactly like that.
This like sort of comic relief character has been killed, and in a very nasty, violent way.
That was shocking. Like, I didn't remember that, but yeah, I was almost kind of shocked at how graphic that was.
Well, I was just like, oh, they really are evil, these bad guys. That sucks.
Yeah.
Dan has to get Wade to the train by himself while avoiding Wade's entire gang.
Yeah, which is like 7 or 8 people, I think, at this point that he's trying to fight off against. Yeah.
And while he's doing it, he inadvertently saves Wade's life, and it shifts the dynamic where Wade starts, you can see him slowly starting to help him. It's like, oh, don't go just yet. There's someone on the roof. And it leads to this very cool moment right at the end where Dan is dead. Like, the whole gang is there, and if all Wade has to do is duck his head down and Dan's dead, and Wade saves his life. It's so cool.
Yeah. The just the respect, that way, because he's an evil guy. There's honor amongst thieves, I guess is the expression. He certainly has some weird sense of honor that ends up coming through in the end with his relationship with Dan, and how he tells him, I didn't want to be, I can't be indebted to anyone. You'd saved my life at one point.
Oh, sorry, that's not where he saved his life. It was when the brother of the guy that Ben murdered storms into the bedroom.
That's right. Yeah, and Dan saves him at that point.
And Dan saves him. I saw a Letterboxd review. I don't remember who, and I'm sorry for not giving you credit. That's called the end of the movie sort of perhaps a fantasy, because not only does Ben save Dan's life, but it immediately starts raining, which saves Dan's farm.
Yeah.
And even if it's not a fantasy in that it's made up, it's a fantasy in that it's the happiest possible ending for this movie. And Dan's wife is waving at him as he drives by, and because she has come to try to save his life, and he's sort of like at the end of his rope. I guess I don't like it. I don't like the idea of it being a fantasy, although the rain, I mean, it does thunder earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
So there's precedent for it. Mm-hmm. But what I like is this, it's not even just that Dan saved Ben's life as why Ben saved Dan's life at the end, but it's one, the arrogance that Ben thinks he can break out of jail.
Yeah. Cool. He's done it twice before.
Right.
He tells him, he reveals that, I've been to Yuma twice and I've broken out twice. So
right.
Sorry.
And I just think this time they spent together has brought them together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done effect really, really well. These two guys who I don't think, if you don't watch a lot of Westerns, you probably haven't seen. I said this to you over text, but Van Heflin played this exact same character in the movie Shane, which people love, especially because Logan is like a little bit related to Shane, but not really. Shane is boring and dull. The only reason to watch Shane is because it has a maniacal Jack Palance performance in it.
Yeah.
That movie stinks, kind of. This is so much better. And what I was going to say is I don't think you're probably super familiar with either of these guys if you didn't watch a lot of Westerns. And then Glenn Ford, you'd know if you've seen like Superman. He plays Superman's dad.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, like they're very much like of the 50s, and this was their genre. So worth checking out a bunch of Westerns to watch these two because they're powerhouses. I mean, Ford is eating it up the entire movie, and it's great.
It really is, and it's perfect. And then like when you get to the remake of it, I mean, Bale and Crowe are so phenomenal in this. It's like it's a kind of an underrated Russell Crowe performance where he really does the same thing where he's just eating it, chewing the scenery every time out. Like, so everything goes a little bit further in the remake, because the remake's a little bit longer. The original movie is about 90 minutes, 95 minutes. It's pretty short, tight movie, and then the remake is about 2 hours long, so it's not like crazy long, but they do they just do more with some of these things, which is a really cool way to expand on what was there. But it's really, really similar. I mean, there's like, I watched them literally back to back, so there's like passages of dialogue that are like word for word, like verbatim out of the movie and stuff like that. So it's a really cool original movie. The remake I think is I like a little bit more, but they're both really, really cool.
Amazing. I'm really happy that you recommended it.
Yeah, I'm glad I caught myself on that before we went too far, because I was like, I've totally seen this movie. Why did I not recommend this? But very entertaining. Like I said, very easy to watch. Like I said, at its length, and there's just a really cool psychological battle going on here. I mean, Wade spends most of his time around like shitheels and outlaws and stuff, and finally he meets this guy who is just the complete opposite of like everyone he's been spending time with, and that respect that grows between them. And even Dan has some sort of respect for Wade in a weird sort of way. So really cool dynamic with the characters in this one.
Thank God we didn't have to talk about Jailhouse Rock for more than 5 minutes, because I don't know what I would have done.
What else was there to say? Yeah.
Shall we do our top lists of 1957?
Let's.
I have a top 5 with a few honorable mentions.
Okay.
Let's get to them. A few honorable mentions. The Sweet Smell of Success. This is an Alexander McKendrick movie starring Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis, where they are both bad men in different ways and trying to take advantage of each other. People love how like slimy and nasty this movie is. I liked it, but didn't love that. But it's very famous and definitely worth checking out. Face in the Crowd is a Elia Kazan movie. We talked about him recently. It stars Andy Griffith in his only successful film role. After this, he made Onion Head, which is one of the worst movies of all time, and it destroyed his movie career. Walter Matthau's in both. Onion Head and Face in the Crowd, but Andy Griffith plays this hayseed who gets found in prison by a radio producer and gets put on the air, and then becomes like very popular and then very powerful, and then gets into politics, and it's very relevant for today. You can find this on Criterion. It's pretty awesome. And then Kubrick's Paths of Glory is my last honorable mention. Jake, I'm going to leave it for you because I know you're going to say more about this one.
Yep.
Incredible movie.
Yeah.
My number 5 is Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal. Probably wouldn't count on your list because it came out in the States in 58.
Yep.
But this stars Max von Sydow as a knight traveling around, and he talks to death. And if you've seen a knight playing chess with death, then it's not Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Bogus Journey. Yep. the Seventh Seal, which is also what the reference for Bill and Ted is. It's an incredible, probably Bergman's most iconic movie, well worth checking out. My number 4 is 3:10 to Yuma. We've talked about that a lot. Incredible Western, even better psychological thriller. My number 3 is Billy Wilder's Witness for the Prosecution. So we talked about Tyrone Power recently in Nightmare Alley. He is one of the stars of this movie where he's accused of murder. He hires Charles Lawton as his lawyer. This is really Charles Lawton's movie. And Lawton spends the entire movie working with Marlene Dietrich in one way or another to help get Power off. And then there's amazing Hitchcockian twist at the end, which I won't spoil. Elsa Lanchester is in this as Lawton's nurse, and they were married in real life, and there's all these rumors that they were each other's beards in real life. Anyway, there's like a lot of really cool stuff going on here. It's one of my favorite movies ever.
Yeah.
But so are number 2 or number 1. Number 2 is Throne of Blood, which we've talked about quite a bit. My favorite Shakespearean adaptation, either my favorite or second favorite Kurosawa movie. An incredible, epic, crazy special effects. There's a scene that we didn't talk about, a shot of Mifune searching through the woods on his horse for the spirit a second time, and they show him like through the branches looking, and he looks so lost, and it's just like one of the coolest shots, and I'm surprised it doesn't show up on those like iconic shots lists that the people play all the time on those reels.
Yeah. Yep.
And then my number 1, no surprise, 12 Angry Men, Sidney Lumet's debut film.
Absurd.
Gotta be the best debut film of all time.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that's stronger than. I mean, it's one of the best movies ever made. So, like,
right.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he didn't write the story. This was a teleplay the year before, which is also very good. I recommend checking out. It's only an hour, and it was remade by William Friedkin, I think
you're right,
for Showtime.
Yep.
Also really good.
Citizen Kane's got to be up there too with best like debut films ever. But I mean, 12 Angry Men would certainly be in that conversation as well.
Right. I will always say Citizen Kane is way more accessible than people give it credit for. But 12 Angry Men is such an easy, fun, captivating watch. Anyone can watch and love 12 Angry Men.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Those are my tops.
Mm-hmm. All right. I don't have any honorable mentions because I've actually only seen 5 films from this year. Like you mentioned, Seventh Seal would appear on my 1958 list. Yeah, it's terrific. Very, very cool movie. My number 5, again, not a great film, but I feel comfortable putting it in the 5 spot, is Jailhouse Rock, which we talked about it. Not great length because there's not much to say. Then my 4 through 1, these are all really tough to rank because I really loved all of these movies and I think they're all excellent. My number 4, we talked about a lot, Throne of Blood, which feels so low, but I mean, these other 3 above it, I've got 3:10 to Yuma is my number 3, and my number 2 is actually 12 Angry Men because I like Paths of Glory a little bit more. Paths of Glory is a World War I movie about is it a lieutenant, or Kirk Douglas, he's a leader in the army in World War I and World War I, and he refuses to follow orders, and then that turns into a whole kind of kicks off the plot of the movie, and it's one of the best Kirk Douglas performances. It's early Kubrick. It came before Spartacus and all that, so it wasn't included. Like when Kubrick had that big box set that came out, it wasn't included in there originally because it was only things from Lolita through Full Metal Jacket or Eyes Wide Shut. Anyway, whatever. It's one of my favorite Kubrick movies. One of the best war movies ever. One of the few World War I movies. Like I said, I think we've got this and All Quiet on the Western Front in 1917, and I don't know, those are like the big ones.
My boss actually once described this as one of the first, and you might be right, one of the first pacifist movies.
Very anti-war, yeah. If I didn't say anti-war, yeah, it's definitely an anti-war film.
And to have come out in 1957, even like before the even before the Vietnam War, when American military pride was still very strong. It's after the Korean War, so there's some, now there's some resentment against the military just for the never ending, like World War II, the war to end all wars. Oops, here's another one.
Like just a couple years later, yeah.
I mean, I haven't read a lot about the inspiration to making Paths of Glory. It's an amazing movie. It's less of a war movie than it is a courtroom drama, though. It's
really more of that. Yeah, it starts off in the war, but then quickly turns into something else.
Great list. All right, we'll be back next week with a look at the movies of 1935. Ooh, way back.